How do you feel when you're walking down the street or driving down the street? There's a group of people who want to eliminate you. Everybody has a different kind of intelligence. Some people are really great at math. Some people are really great at science. Some people know geography very well. I don't know any of that stuff, but I have a very strong intuition when it comes to people. Why force yourself into something that is inherently so painful for you both? And what I was receiving from you was, I must stay. I have to stay. Leaving is not an option. Some people feel that journaling and coaching the way that we do feels like therapy. And what I would say is it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy.
What are some of the common themes that come up that you keep seeing over and over?
I see that they typically struggle in 4 key areas, and it's repetitive. The first thing is that typically they feel. What is your greatest piece of wisdom as a coach?
My greatest piece of wisdom as a coach, I think it's Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Furious Curious Show. I am here with Kim Ades, who is my coach, and I'm very excited to have her on and be here in my studio. Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Furiously Curious Coaching. That's my coaching company. I help business owners be successful without sacrificing faith, family, and free time. So if that's you, if you're dealing with one more email, one more sale, one more business thing, and you don't have time for the stuff that's most important to you and you feel stuck in that spot, I think it can help you. So reach out to me if you're interested in that. Text the word interested to 604-703-9045 and we can chat. And this will be a great episode to talk about coaching because basically everything I know about coaching is from the one and only Kim. So I want to start with the story.
First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm excited.
Good. I'm excited as well. The story of how we met.
Yeah.
So this is my version of it.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm going to get some things wrong from your perspective.
Oh, let's hear what you got.
Okay. So I wanted to be MDT CEO when I worked at MDT. And so Martin, who was the CEO, said, you need to get coached first to see if that's actually something you want to do or not. And so I said, okay. And so he connected me with you.
So you wanted to replace Martin?
I don't know if replace is the right word, but I wanted to move up.
But he was the CEO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was open to the idea. There was no time frame as that or something like that. He said, let's just start with coaching. And so he connected me with you to see if that's actually something I wanted to do or not. And initially I was like, how is this going to work? Because I felt like there was a big values difference. So I was like, you were anti-gun. I worked at a gun company. I was conservative. You were liberal. And there was just like, well, how is this going to work? So we connected.
But did you know all that stuff about me before we connected?
I guess I didn't. I think I knew some. I mean, we had an initial call in the fall and then we didn't start initially. And then we started in the spring. It took a couple months because I was working with somebody else. And you said you shouldn't have 2 coaches. You need one. And so we started in the spring with the 10-week program that you do. And it was interesting because I remember even just talking about, I remember you saying like, why do you want to be CEO? I'm like, I don't know. I want to move up. I'm like, why do you want to move up? And what's up? Like, why is CEO up? I'm like, well, I don't know. And you asked, are you going to make more money? I said, no, probably not. She said, are you going to enjoy the work more? I'm like, no, probably not. And it ended up being just I wanted it for status. And then you challenged me and said, is that actually something you want to do? Is that the reason you want that position? I realized no. And ended up going a different path and ended up doing coaching myself now, but that's how it all started.
So yeah, I remember it differently.
Okay, I'm not surprised.
So I remember our initial conversation, and I remember in that initial conversation that we really actually connected. We had a really great conversation, but you were working with another coach, and you said, I'm not ready for this right now. And in my brain, I'm like, he's going to come back for sure. And we went our separate ways, and, when you're busy with work, you kind of like move along and you don't hold on to someone if they're not ready to go. And then you came back, but I wasn't surprised. And I don't remember you wanting the role of CEO at that point. I remember you wanting the role of VP of sales at that point.
Okay.
That's what I remember, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you remember it better. And I remember there were other things plaguing you at the time. And in our first conversation, my memory, admittedly, it's a little foggy. We started talking about those things that were plaguing you. And I think that piece of the conversation stayed with you. Otherwise, why would you come back?
What was plaguing me? You remember?
You had things going on. You had maybe, your family was plaguing you. Maybe your relationship with Martin was plaguing you. Maybe your role in the company was plaguing you. You were successful and you did want to move up. You had just all these things floating around in your brain. And I just started gently poking at some of them, as I do.
Mm.
Right. And I think that conversation for you, I'm speaking for you, so you can tell me I'm totally wrong here. But I think you went, okay, that was a different conversation than I'm used to having. And like, I remember that we stayed on the phone or on however we were talking longer than you expected.
Mm.
And so something happened in our first conversation that you said, okay, like, I'm going to come back to this at some point when I'm done this coaching experience that I'm in.
Well, you asked good questions, and it wasn't just, I don't know, the questions you're supposed to ask, but I think it was genuine curiosity.
Furiously curious.
Furiously curious. I remember it was week 2. You asked me what was most important to me in order, and I said God, and then family, and then work, and then I said okay. You said okay, and then week 6, you said, Kyle, I think that's bullshit. I think work's most important to you. And I'm like, no, it's not. And you're like, well, all you do is work. Your actions show what you believe, not your words. You're like, I don't care. I'm a Jew. I don't care what you put first.
I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, are you living in accordance to your values? So, and if you're not, then it doesn't sit well with you in the long run, right? So if God is first, what's the indicator of that? If family is second, do they actually show up second in your day-to-day life?
Actions.
Yeah.
Actions, yeah. There was a big disconnect for me there. And you helped a lot with that.
How did you feel getting coached by someone who's Jewish?
That didn't come up for me for a long time.
Because I'd never told you?
I don't think you told me, no. No, you didn't tell me.
I don't think Martin even knows.
No, really?
I don't know.
But
I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, that's the cool thing about coaching is that you're, which I didn't know before I started, is that your own opinions don't really show up. You're helping your
my personal values.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
They do in a way, but not in a pushy, forceful, you need to believe what I believe way. But they definitely show up in the sense of when I hear a belief that clashes with your ability to live a life of ease, peace, exhilaration, fulfillment, or joy, then I will challenge it. And my values are that sometimes we get in our own ways. And so I'm able to see that. So when I say my values show up, yes, in the sense of I can see when you're taking on something that maybe was inherited or handed down that doesn't allow you to live in a state of peace. So then it comes up.
Like what would be an example of that? Like a religious belief or something like?
Could be a religious belief. Could be a belief about yourself. Could be a belief about the people around you. Could be a belief about, for example, God, family, and work, right? It could be about anything. Could be about what's right and wrong.
Yeah. So one of the ways it came up was, I remember you asked me like, about my marriage. So we'll get to why coaching, why your personal lives ties into your business life and how they're not disconnected. But so you asked about Nicole and if Nicole knew everything about me, and I said no. And you said, what doesn't she know? I'm like, I kind of danced around it. But you were the first person I told that I was unfaithful to her in my marriage. Nobody else knew. I felt safe telling you. And that helped me just on a road to recovery and telling Nicole and getting to where we are now. But in that journey, you really challenged me really hard on why don't you get divorced? Like, why don't you move on? And several times, and there were separations involved in that over the last years and stuff. Talk to me about that, like, because I pushed back on it and we clashed on it. But I think it was good that you challenged me because it pushed me into being more sure of what I wanted and that I wanted to stay. But what was that, from your perspective, what was that experience like?
Well, so you were in this marriage, and from my perspective, from the very beginning, you were both not in a happy marriage, right? So there were many, many indicators of that. One indicator was that you were not communicating well. You know, you would coexist in the same environment, but not really connect. And I saw that on both sides. And like, I remember for a long time, like, that was a big issue. You were not talking to one another, right? Even one of your earliest areas of struggle was, hey, like, Nicole doesn't ask me questions about anything. And for you, you read that as she's not interested in me, right? She doesn't take time to care about me in the way that I want to be cared for. So this was not a new problem. It was an old problem. And then you did stray in the marriage. And so there were all these problems, and you continued to stray over time, but you still wanted to stay in the marriage. And so that all didn't add up for me. Right? So if you guys can't communicate and you keep going outside of your marriage, what's the indicator, or why do you want to stay if this is causing you so much unhappiness, causing you both so much unhappiness? Why? Why force yourself into something that is inherently so painful for you both? And what I was receiving from you was, I must stay. I have to stay. Leaving is not an option. And what I heard from you was, leaving is not an option because my religion, my upbringing says so. And the last thing that I want for anybody is to feel forced into something, forced to stay in something that is inherently unhealthy. So what I always want for my clients, including you, was it's important for you to go get healthy, right? So whether you're in a relationship or not, in order to have a healthy relationship, we need to have two healthy partners. And what I saw was two very unhealthy partners, and two unhealthy partners who are trying to make it work and who are failing miserably. Right? But you were like adamant. And at one point we got into a battle. I remember that day. I remember where I was even on that day. And you said very strongly, I don't want to discuss this anymore. I want you to help me figure out how to stay. And that's when I said, okay, I'll help you do that. Even though my values were, why are you forcing yourself to stay in misery? So I let go of what I thought was a better choice for you. And I said, okay, I'll just get behind him. If he wants this to work, let me see how I can help him do that. I don't know how, but let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
Right.
And in hindsight, now that you look back,
I think it's a miracle.
it is a miracle.
It's a miracle. I think that you both had the strength of mind and the conviction that this is a place, as hard as it was and as tough as it was for both of you. I mean, the amount of pain that you both experienced was crazy, but you both had a greater desire to stick it out. And that is what made you stay together. That's it. That's what it was. You had the desire to stay in it.
Just in general, what was it like coaching me? Is it you coached a lot of people? You've been doing this for a long time, and I want to get to that. But what was it like coaching me? I know there was, I think you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago, that there were different points where it was challenging for you.
That was one of them. It was challenging on two fronts because, number one, I felt like you were committing to an ideology because of the ideology, not because that was
Because I actually wanted it?
exactly.
Okay.
So that was tough for me. It was tough for me as a coach to say, okay, like, where do I actually stand here? What am I supposed to do? You know, when I felt like, you know, you weren't doing what was inherently healthy for either of you, but I also had to get behind you. So it challenged me as a coach at that time. Because typically as a coach, like, I'm very clear. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I know I can see where somebody's choosing a healthy path versus when they're not. And here you basically said, here's what I want your help with, period, end of story, no discussion. And so I had to have a conversation with myself saying, can I actually do this for him? Can I get behind this? Even though, like, every single, you know, it's the writing's on the wall in neon colors, right? So I had to completely let go and say, okay, fine. I'm going to get behind him regardless of what he's choosing.
Yeah. And okay, so that was regarding the marriage, but what about more in general?
I mean, we've come a long way. You know, sometimes you're very short with your words. You know, Kyle, how are you? I'm okay. Okay, I need more now. Please, right? So in a coaching relationship, you know, you can't carry the conversation the whole time. You need the client to participate. And sometimes you didn't always give me a lot to work with, even though there was so much there.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, so I just wouldn't explain very much.
Well, even like, look, when you journal now and I ask a bunch of questions, you take my question, you repost it in your journal, and then you give me a one-line answer. Yes, that's how I felt. That's it. Right? Correct?
Sometimes, yes.
Yes. I'm like, dude, come on, elaborate here. Right? So from that standpoint, sometimes I want more. But with you, I feel personally like we've traveled a long road together.
Yeah.
And I said to you the other day, you're like my sixth kid, right? And I feel that way. Like, I feel like, you know, I could say things to you that maybe I couldn't say to other people. Like, you know, you're driving too fast, slow down, you know, like, and
Yeah.
I just, and so I feel like we, in a way, crossed an invisible boundary where we're in a personal zone of friendship or whatever that is.
Yeah. One of the things that came up a lot is I challenged if you actually cared, and I challenged, I would try to push you away almost to a degree. I didn't trust that you would actually stick around. And you said to me, the only thing, I think one time you said, don't ever disrespect me and I'm not going anywhere. And I remember that very clearly. And clearly never have. She wouldn't be sitting here. But what was that? I guess two-part question is, what was that like when I was challenging you? And what's the role of a coach in a relationship of being a solid spot that's not movable? Because that was the biggest thing I got, was like in the chaos of my life over those 3 years, which was just, there was chaos. I had you to go to and listen to and actually be helpful and actually cared. I really believed you cared. It took me a long time to get to that spot that you actually cared.
Well, because for a long time you're like, yeah, I'm paying her. It's her job. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, the caring part is, and I don't know, I have a soft spot for you. Ask my husband. He thinks that I'm like, you know, very big softy when it comes to you. But anyways,
Alan's here in the room listening along. So.
yes. But so the caring part was easy. It's you weren't used to that. You weren't used to someone who was just consistent. You weren't used to someone who was just like, okay, you can do what you want. I'm still going to be here. And so I think that was a new experience for you, especially from someone maybe a slightly older female, right? So it was a new experience for you. That part was easy. But I also think creating some parameters for you to say, hey, here's what's important to me, which is basic fundamental respect. So here's how you be in a relationship with me, and being very, very clear about that. So we created like a terms of engagement, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And it just kind of happened naturally. It's not like I have conversations with every single other person that I've ever coached around, what's it going to take for Kim to stay?
Yeah.
But those are relationship terms for me. They're not coaching terms. They're not anything. They're relationship terms. And they're the same terms that I would have with my kids. Hey, you want to have a good, healthy relationship with me? It requires that we respect one another. And that's it.
And me challenging, it would come up in different ways. What was it like being challenged by me? I can't remember exactly how I did it, and I wasn't even aware I was doing it. You actually put light on it and say, "Yeah, you're challenging me right now." And I wasn't self-aware enough to realize that. But what's that like? What was that like from your? Is that more common with other clients as well?
It's not that it's common with other clients, but I read you very easily and well. Like I saw what you were doing, and I understood very, very quickly. Like he is pushing me. He's testing me to see if when he pushes, I'll walk. Because it's possible that you've pushed others and they have walked, right? But all that doesn't rattle me, scare me, or anything like that.
Yeah.
I knew what you needed from me was solid consistency.
Yeah.
More than anything we talked about, by the way.
The solid consistency. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm very, very thankful for it. I mean, I was telling someone yesterday, probably top 5, maybe more than that, even most influential people in my life.
Wow.
And have had a huge impact in just getting me to a much healthier spot. And I think most of all, aligning my values with my behaviors and making that clear in my own mind. And also, I mean, I was doing a lot of other work as well on counseling and things like that.
You did a ton of work all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you wanted a change. You wanted to get to a better place. And it's a journey, right? You don't just, doesn't happen overnight, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
Like you want to change. We're all evolving. We're all growing, and it just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah.
You got to put in the time. It's like if you want good abs, I always say this. If you want good abs, you can't just go to the gym for 6 weeks. You got to keep going to the gym.
For years.
Yeah.
You've said to me before, and this is my own experience now as a coach, that you get as much out of a coaching experience as the client does, if not more.
100%.
What was that? What did you get out of our coaching experience?
What do I keep getting out of our coaching experience?
Or what did you gain, or like, what do you learn?
For me, I gained a relationship that is very different from other relationships for me, right? Because we do have a huge differential, different sexes, different ages, different upbringings, different religious influences, different way of seeing a lot of things. But all that never really mattered, right? Because what ended up happening was we built a relationship actually based on a lot of our commonalities, what was important to us. And so for me, the experience with you is a really cherished relationship that exists today. But at the same time, yeah, you did challenge me as a coach. And so when anybody is challenged and they rise to the challenge, they grow. So you caused me to grow, right? You caused me to have conversations with myself about, okay, what is my role here right now? What is my job? How do I serve this person the most? Does that mean if I'm serving him the way he wants me to be, the way he wants to be served, am I kind of turning my back on myself, or am I being consistent? So all kinds of things that I grappled with internally just because you were just being you. Yeah.
So you talked about all the differences that we have, and that there's still an awesome friendship that we have. What do you think we can learn from that in society in general? Because in society today, I think there's a lot of like isolation. There's a lot of groups that kind of like they stay in their groups, they talk to themselves, and they don't go outside their groups. When everyone thinks the same, no one thinks at all. And I think the society as a whole would be a lot healthier if there was more engagement and relationships, even though there isn't necessarily alignment on religious beliefs or an alignment on in other ways. And I think our relationship for me has really shown that that's possible, because of curiosity and respect and kindness and things like that. Do you have the same thoughts around that? Like,
Well, I think that you're a special person. The reason why I think you're special and unusual is because you do have a great amount of curiosity that a lot of people don't have. And so you're genuinely curious, like, how does that work? What does that mean? What role does that play? And you want to just basically know. And then you take in the information and you say, what do I do with that? How does that fit with me? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I want to adopt some of it? And so you're always like taking in new information and assessing it for yourself. But in order to do that, you need to be open to receiving that new information. And I think that when you look at society and different cultures and different religious bodies, there's not really a lot of curiosity, right? There's more fear. And so typically people don't take the time to learn, to ask, to gather information, to assess, to take the stuff that they like and adopt it. They just say, I don't want any part of that. And they stay far away.
And do you think curiosity is something that you have naturally as a person, or is that something you can, a skill that you can create? Like, how did you, I would say you're very curious as well. And, you know, about even just you meet someone at the till at the grocery store and you're curious, like you want to know, like, is that something that's been from a young age already, or?
I think I got it from my dad. You know, he was the guy who went to the grocery store, as you say, and looked in someone else's cart and said, you know, what are you going to make with that? How are you going to cook it? What's the recipe you're going to use? So I think it's very genetic, but at the same time, I think if I'm going to be honest, your curiosity is at a higher level, right? Like you're more open to taking things in, and maybe it's an age factor, you know?
My curiosity is at a higher level than yours.
Yes. And I think, again, it's an age factor. You know, I've lived through a lot of life experiences, and so perhaps my ideas are a little more set in, you know, and you cause me to reconsider some of those ideas, right? So for me, I love being intellectually challenged, ignited, you know, awakened. You do that for me in a lot of different ways. You know, just watching you grow your business. I sit here and I'm like, how did he do that so fast? You know, how is it possible? And I look at you with a great deal of admiration to see what you're doing and how you're doing it and some of the bold moves you're making. And I'm like, man, this guy has courage. Try to find a good word.
Well, thank you for that. How did you get to where you are today? You've been coaching for how many years now?
Almost 21.
Almost 21 years. So maybe let's start with your background. I know your origins are in Egypt. Did you grow up did you were born in Egypt, or you were born in Canada?
So my family, my parents grew up in Egypt.
Okay.
But my parents both have passed, Jewish background. And so in Egypt, Jews weren't very welcomed. So it came to a point where my dad was working and he lost his job. They just stopped paying him because he was Jewish. And luckily, prior to that, he had put in a request to move either to Australia or Canada. And they fulfilled his request and sent him to Montreal. And so he immigrated to Montreal. He was a chemist and got a job at Sherwin-Williams at the time. And slowly he brought the rest of his family over from Egypt, from Israel to Canada. And I grew up in Montreal, and I went to school there, and I had this desire I thought, I need to be independent, I need to move away, I need to go away to university. And I ended up going to the University of Ottawa, did an undergraduate degree in psychology, and then I met my first husband there at the time. I got married very young, too young, I think, but very young.
How old?
I was 20.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had 2 kids. And I ended up getting divorced. I was married for 15 years. And I got an undergraduate degree in psychology and then a master's degree in business as well. And in this first marriage, we moved to Toronto. And I started a business called Upward Motion. And that business, we developed software. We built simulation-based assessments. And the purpose of those assessments was to help companies make better hiring decisions. We grew that business. It was a great business. But when our marriage fell apart, because we were running it together, I ended up selling my part of the business, and I found myself suddenly a single mom and, no job. And within 6 weeks, I got hired by a coaching company in Toronto. And I lasted for about 8.5, 9 months because I'm not really employable. Once you're an entrepreneur, it's really hard to work for other people.
Yeah.
But I had an opportunity to observe how they coach in this organization. And every fiber of my being said, they're doing it wrong. And I think I could do a better job. And that's when I started Frame of Mind Coaching.
So for this company, you were a coach for them for 9 months?
I was not a coach. I was their VP of marketing.
Okay. And you were observing how the coaches were coaching and you thought they were doing it wrong?
So I learned about coaching, and their fundamental model for coaching was accountability. So they were coaching real estate professionals. So their model was, hey, I'll help you create a business plan. And in that business plan, there are lots of things you need to do in order to reach your goals. And as your coach, I'll hold you accountable to make sure that you're doing all the things in your business plan so that you could be as successful as you want to be. And inside of my brain, I thought, why does somebody have to hold somebody else accountable? Why aren't they just doing the things they need to do in order to succeed? What's up with that? And I thought it's probably related to the way they think. It's probably related to their confidence. It's probably the way they feel about themselves. It's probably really around their belief systems. If I could get inside their heads and see how they think and help them think just a little bit differently, then I'll be effective as a coach and I won't have to hold them accountable. Because that sounded like a lot of hard work. And that wasn't so much fun.
So you thought about it in the way of, it's really interesting that you thought those things just on your own. But so it was I guess there's 2 parts to it. First is how can I get to the end goal in a way that doesn't cause so much strife like accountability does, but where they naturally want to get to that goal themselves, but also that their frame of mind, which is the name of your company, was different. And that was just something that you were observing as...
Well, it's 2 parts. Part A, so there are many parts. So part A is, as I was running this assessment company, one of the things that we identified is after we were testing hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, we discovered that there was one key difference between top performers and other people. And that was their degree of emotional resilience. Right? So people who bounce back from adversity are more likely to succeed than people who experience adversity and have a really hard time and can't really get up. So that was one piece of information. The question is, can you help someone build can you help someone build emotional resilience? The answer is yes. That was part A. Part B was seeing this accountability model. And for me, there were 2 components. One component is, as a coach, I don't want to do the work of holding other people accountable. But then the flip side of that is, do I want to have someone holding me accountable? I don't like that idea. Why do I need to answer to someone else? That doesn't feel so good. Think about it. Do you like answering to other people?
No.
No.
It wouldn't have worked. The coaching we did together wouldn't have worked.
Right.
It worked because you weren't doing that.
Exactly. And so, and I also thought about who do I want to coach? I want to coach very highly driven individuals. So if I want to coach very highly driven individuals, these are not people who want to answer to others. They're typically people who start businesses. They're typically entrepreneurs or C-suite level leaders, and they're typically very self-motivated, self-driven. The last thing they want to do is answer to someone else. So I just felt like this accountability model had a bunch of flaws in it, right? So it didn't make sense.
Okay, so you were doing that for 9 months and you realized it yourself. So then you just quit and say, I'm going to start my own thing and do the same.
No, I didn't fit. I really, really didn't fit. And I'll give you an example. So they had a team of salespeople, and every day they had huddles, morning huddles. And every day they would go around the circle, and each person would say, oh, I'm going to make 100 cold calls today. And then at the end of the day, they would track how many cold calls they actually made. And if the number was not 100, let's say it was only 85, then that person had to do 15 push-ups. And I thought, that's not for me. Like, that's not a really great culture that I want to build. Like, that just doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
That feels like a culture of punishment instead of, like, it doesn't feel inspiring. It feels like not super modern, not super evolved.
Yeah.
So there were lots of things like that that were taking place in this organization that just clashed with who I was. So I was I was ill at ease. A, I wasn't running it and I was an entrepreneur. B, I looked at how they were doing things on all kinds of levels philosophically and just felt like this doesn't sit well with me. So, you know, when something doesn't sit well with you, you're a fish out of water. I was a fish out of water. And I was, the opposite of drowning. I needed the water to thrive.
Yeah.
And I just didn't work there. So I wasn't working well for me. Like, I didn't feel good there. And they didn't enjoy having me there either. Right. So I remember the conversation I had with my so-called boss. And he said, we need to discuss your role here. And I remember this coming out of my mouth. I said, is it over yet?
That's the most Kim thing to say.
Is it over?
Brutal honesty.
Yes. And he said, I think it's a good idea that we go our separate ways. I said, yes, I agree. And I remember the feeling walking out of there, like
Relief.
Thank God this is over. I just felt like I was in a place that wasn't good for me.
And did you know then that you wanted to start a coaching company or?
No, but I did it very quickly thereafter.
How did it start? How did you get?
So initially it wasn't a coaching company. Initially it was a consulting company so I was very, very involved in the real estate industry. In fact, I won an award. Did you know that?
No.
I won an award for being one of the 50 most influential women in real estate. So I was very well connected. I knew a lot of people. And there were all these businesses.
So your curiosity that you naturally had was already showing up then, because to get connected with a lot of people, you need to be curious.
I don't know that it was my curiosity that did it. I think what did it was I was an extremely driven entrepreneur who had a goal to sell my product and service at the time. So I was the person who went to every single trade show. I was the person who would wake up at 5 a.m. and schedule 2 breakfast meetings, then stand at a trade show booth all day, have a lunch meeting, then go for, before dinner cocktails, then go find a group of people to have dinner with, then after dinner cocktails, then dancing, sleep at 2, wake up at 5 and start all over again. Like, that's how it was. Not anymore, but that's how it was at the time, right? Like, I was just like this.
Yeah.
Go, go, go.
Yeah.
So, what were we talking about? I lost my train of thought there.
I said, like, you weren't, it was a consulting company.
Oh, yes. So there were a lot of people who were trying to sell their products and services to the real estate industry, but they didn't understand the lay of the land. Real estate has a very specific order. You need to understand the order. You need to understand the access points. You need to understand the structure in order to make it work effectively. So in the beginning, I thought, okay, well, I'll just offer consulting to all of these companies who want to access the real estate industry. And so I started to do that, but I also started to realize that I'm actually not doing that. I'm actually coaching, right? Like the conversation was not just about the structure of the industry and sales and marketing and all that kind of stuff. It was really about their belief systems. And I thought,
And did you identify as the word as coaching? Because the coaching you were experiencing before was just accountability stuff.
yeah, so no. I was just like having conversations with them about their beliefs. And then I'm like, you know what? Why don't I run a pilot? I'll just try this out. Like I have this idea, I have this model in my brain, I have this idea of what it should look like. So I called my friend, who at the time was the vice president of Royal LePage in Canada. You guys have Royal LePage?
Yeah.
And I said to her, you know, I have this idea for coaching. And there were lots of coaches in the real estate industry. I said, but it's radically different from all the other coaching programs out there. The thing is, I need some people to coach. She said, I have some people to coach, which I knew. And I said, great, I'm running a pilot. But I had a lot of fears about coaching. And the first fear I had was, like, if I coach someone, what the heck am I going to talk to them about for a whole hour? That's way too long. And so the way I dealt with that fear was I said, okay, I'm going to coach a group of people at a time, 5 people. And if everybody talks for 10 minutes, the hour will pass, right? So that's what I did. But keep in mind, I never coached anybody a day in my life. So I was very nervous about it. And so I said, well, I'm coaching people in the real estate industry. What if they ask me real estate questions and I don't know the answers? So I decided to hire this guy who was a coach, a traditional coach in the real estate industry, to co-coach with me. Just in case I got stuck, he could answer those questions. And so the rules of engagement were, when you're running a pilot, you run a pilot, and at the end of the pilot, I need feedback from you. Honest, transparent feedback.
Yeah.
So I charged everybody $100 for 10 weeks of coaching. And I hired this guy and I paid him $1,000. So I was paying for my coaching MBA, right? I lost $500 and I ran my first 10 weeks of coaching. And from the very beginning, I asked these people to journal. And I coached in the Kim frame of mind coaching way. And at the end of the 10 weeks, the feedback I got was, we don't like that guy. You don't need him. Get rid of him. We love what you're doing. We love the coaching. We love the journaling. We love what we've learned. We loved how much we grew. And I was shocked to see that people were getting results because I didn't know what I was doing. So then the second time around, I charged a little more instead of.
So what were you doing that you didn't know what you were doing?
First of all, they were journaling and I was reading their journals and I'm like, well, I want to know more things. So I just started asking them questions. So it became an interactive journal. So they loved that. The second thing is that I was naturally challenging their beliefs. I was challenging the way they see the world, the way they see themselves. And I didn't know that I was doing that. I was just doing it.
You were just being curious.
I was being curious, but I had a very strong instinct that, hey, the way you're looking at this thing isn't really helping you reach your goals here. It's holding you back. That's very, very evident to me. And so I was just being myself. And over time, I started charging a little bit more, but coaching more and more people. And then I coached this one person who said, but how are you doing this? Can you teach me how to coach? And I remember saying, I don't know how I'm doing this. I'm just doing it.
Yeah.
But there was a huge push on me to teach. And the minute that you have to kind of sit back and go, okay, what am I doing? You realize that there's actually a method or a logic to your approach. What you're doing instinctively actually makes a lot of sense. And so I sat down and I'm like, what am I doing? And that's when the frame of mind coaching method came to be.
And journaling was something that you'd done previous to that, right? You have always been a journaler.
I've always been a journaler ever since I was a kid. I remember being a kid having a mad crush on someone, and I needed to express my strong, deep feelings, so I would write in my diary.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the journaling part of our coaching experience, I think I think it elevates the whole coaching thing in huge ways that you just, I don't know how you measure it, but what is it about journaling that's so powerful in the coaching experience?
So many things. So number one is that I feel that a lot of coaches try to coach someone without really knowing them, without really understanding their lives, their context, their way of thinking, their values, their priorities, their beliefs. They're missing information. So number one is when you journal with me, I'm getting data points, and that data helps me know who you are, and it helps me pick up patterns of your behavior, your thoughts, and really where you're getting in your own way of success. But there's more to it than that, right? When you journal with me every day and I show up every single day, what happens? Our relationship starts to grow. You start to have trust that I will show up every day. Who does that in your life? Right? And I'm consistent and I'm reliable. That trust is critical for coaching to actually progress, to actually have an impact. If you don't trust your coach, what do?
Withhold.
Withhold, put the brakes on, withdraw, disengage. So it's really important for that frequency of contact to take place. The other thing is when you're journaling and I'm reading your journal and asking you questions, that allows us to go deeper and peel back the onions and cover much more ground than you could just on a call by itself. So there's so many elements of this that are really, really vital that change the game in coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's awesome.
What's it like for you when you're reading your clients' journals?
I mean, well, if you don't have that, you just spend most of your calls catching up and learning on the calls, and you can't actually do any of the coaching. When someone shows up on a call, you're getting them in their frame of mind on that day, in that hour, but there's many more hours to the week. And so you're losing a lot when you're not journaling, which you either get. There's something about journaling when you ask questions, so the client journals and you ask questions, they have way more time to process the questions and they're not put on the spot. And so you get different answers.
And you also have more time to process.
And I have that as well. And so you just have way more material to work with and way more understanding of the person that you just can't get on a call. Things to reference back to that they said. And yeah, so I think it's invaluable. I don't think I could have been where I am today out in the coaching company without the journaling part. I don't know.
I don't know how people do it without a journal.
No, it'd be very hard. What's the difference between journaling and therapy? I don't know if you've done therapy or not, but I've done a lot of therapy since I was 9 years old. And I always found it very ineffective. I still go to therapy now because I do believe it is effective. But in many ways I don't. First of all, because there is no relationship in between the meetings. And there's a lot of rules that counselors have that they have to adhere to. If I see you in the store, we'd give each other a hug. If I see my counselor in the store, if they ignore me, like he doesn't know me. Counselors, your appointment's over at 3:00, and all of a sudden the conversation's over at 3:00, and you might have been talking about something really heavy. There's way more. You can move forward. There's also a lot of forward thinking in coaching. When therapy is more looking back and it's not really, you're not really moving forward. But from your perspective, what do you think the differences are? And
yeah, all those things that you mentioned. But for me, journaling allows me to get a lot more from my client. Again, I talk about data points. You're right. When you have that call, the person comes in with a very specific, let's say, mood or frame of mind based on what's happening to them that week, that hour, that minute. And the whole entire session is colored by that mood or that frame of mind. When you have a journal, you just have so much more context. The breadth of the relationship is so much deeper, so much wider. You're covering so much more ground. And you have access to these pockets of a person's life that you don't normally have access to. So for me, it's a much, much richer experience. Some people feel that journaling and coaching the way that we do feels like therapy. And what I would say is it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. So yeah, it feels good. It feels healthy, feels productive. It feels relieving and feels all these things that we want it to feel, but it's definitely not therapy. Very different from therapy. And there is a focus on the future. So, okay, all these things happened to you in the past. Great. But we're not here to repair the past. We're here to say, what are we going to do moving forward? What are we going to do now? What are we going to do tomorrow? And so on. So it's really about helping a person craft a life that they want to live and really look at how their past and their interpretation of the past might be coloring their ability to move forward.
In coaching, and I know you've experienced this as well, because I mean, I just shared earlier that even my infidelity, you were the first person I told, but you hear stories that people often have not told anybody. You hear a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, but we're not certified, counselors or therapists and stuff like that. And yet we still find ourselves in these positions and helping these people move forward. When you hear these stories and come across them, what is your process or how do you approach it when Sheldon shares a lot of trauma or something else when you're not necessarily certified in a certain way to deal with it, but you're still helping them through it?
For me, life isn't always kind, right? We all experience something. It could be illness, it could be loss, it could be abuse, it could be a million different things. Life isn't always kind, but we have a choice about what we do with our experiences. And so when I hear a story of a tough experience, whatever that is, it's very, very important for me, both personally and professionally, to understand that that experience doesn't have to be a lifetime sentence. That experience, as hard and difficult and traumatic as it was, does not need to be the story forever. And so, why is that important for me professionally? Because if I am unable to see you in a better place, I'm not equipped to coach you. But also, if I'm not able to see you in a better place, how will it affect me as a human being?
What do you mean in a better place? Like apart, like separated from what's holding you back, or?
Like if I look at you and only look at your trauma, if you are equivalent to your trauma, then it's hard for me to function as a human. It would be hard for me to get out of bed in the morning. So for both of those reasons, personally and professionally, my job is to hear your trauma, understand it.
Encapsulate it.
Yes, encapsulate it, but also allow it to live where it originated in its place, and allow us to create a space for there to be a different future. That's really important, that distinction. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I hear stories that I do think about for a while that do maybe keep me up at night, but I make sure that those are very short-lived.
And what do you do when someone doesn't want to talk about it? Because we know how, and so that was my experience. We talking about abuse from my childhood, and I just said, I don't know, I can't remember what I said. What did I say?
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, not going to talk about it. Well, you know how we know how much, especially when something is that we don't want to talk about, it affects how we're showing up today. So what's your approach when someone doesn't want to talk about it, and why is it important in coaching to talk about those things that you don't want to talk about?
So when a client says, I don't want to talk about that, I'm respectful, right? It's very important that I say, okay, I respect your desire and your request not to talk about this. But I also, in the back of my head, make note of that. I make note of that. Why? Because if it's something so uncomfortable, that means that it takes up a lot of space for a person emotionally, and it's probably getting in the way. So while they might not be ready to talk about this right here, right now, I understand that I need to circle back at some point, but only if and when I feel that they might be ready now. And so sometimes it's like they slam the door in my face. I don't want to talk about that. I say, okay. Every once in a while, I knock on the door again to see if it'll open up, to see if there's a little crack in the door that I can squeeze into or crack open a little bit more. But like I remember I coached someone for 8 years and she never wanted to talk about her marriage for the first at least 4 of those years. She always said, I don't want to talk about this. And I knew we could talk about everything else, her career, her leadership, her team, but none of that was important until we talked about her marriage. I knew that. But it took a long time for her to get to a place of absolute safety for her. Other people get to safety in like a week. But for her, it was very difficult. It was a huge source of stress and shame. And she didn't want to reveal herself. She didn't want to look bad. She didn't want to face this issue. Right? So sometimes you just got to wait it out and you have to keep knocking on the door.
What part does forgiveness play in the hurts we've experienced as humans from our past in moving forward? It's something that,
Well, why don't you answer that question?
well, I think it's huge. Like, I don't think you can move forward until you forgive the people that have hurt you. It's me doing that many times has given huge amounts of peace and being able to let go and move forward. And I think it's really crucial. But that's also very much tied to my faith as well in forgiving. So what's it for you? Like, how do you, the relationship of forgiveness, and how do you approach it with a client that maybe has been genuinely hurt by someone really badly and you know that they need to forgive? Do you say you have to forgive? Like, how do you work through that with somebody?
What I do is, so we have a set of what we call frame of mind coaching principles. And the principles are really a framework that we use to coach people. And so when we notice that anger, pain, hostility, resentment are playing prominent themes in a person's life, we don't say you have to forgive. What we do is we show the cost of those emotions. We show that there's this bad thing that happened in the past, but they are keeping it alive. And they are continuing to inflict pain upon themselves with those emotions. And so the goal isn't we need to forgive the other person. The goal is we need to get to a place of peace because that's good and healthy for us. So how do we do that? Right? The other is the subject of frustration, upset, whatever, resentment, anger. But that's not really the issue. The issue is we're keeping those feelings alive by replaying the story. And so my job is to empower or to hand over the reins of responsibility to the client to decide how they want to live.
So that seems kind of open-ended. So when you say it like that, so do you have to get more specific, or like, how do you, if you don't use the word, you don't use the word forgiveness then?
Yeah, we can, but I don't say you have to forgive. We say, what I find is forgiving someone else is like is the first layer. The deeper layer is forgiving yourself.
Yes.
So that's where I ultimately want to get to. Other people are often like,
And is that something that you learned yourself, like that you realized you needed to forgive yourself about things or forgive others? Like, how did you, like, this is all things that I've learned through Freedom Session or getting coached by you and stuff like that. How did you, was it just experience when you've seen people being gripped by the past and anger, resentment, those things like that? Or an experience of you had to forgive somebody?
people have different levels or different kinds of intelligence. I watch, what's that show called? Jeopardy with my husband every day. And I sit beside him and I watch the show and he gets all the answers and I get 1, 2, right? Everybody has a different kind of intelligence. Some people are really great at math. Some people are really great at science. Some people know geography very well. I don't know any of that stuff. But I have a very strong intuition when it comes to people. That's it. So how did I learn this? For me, it was always intuitive. And then when I looked at what I was feeling, you could say, like, what is that about? And when I had to make sense out of it and explain it to someone else, that's when it became something I could discuss or explain or had a framework to. So it wasn't ever necessarily something that came from experience. It came from a lot of observation, a lot of exposure to many people, and just straight up intuition.
Mm.
And a lot of people say intuition is your ability to process information very, very quickly. So for me, when it comes to humans and human nature, I process information quickly. Just the same way as somebody else might process a math equation very quickly. For me, I process human behavior, human interaction, human emotion very quickly.
I want to change gears a bit. I want to talk about honesty, brutal honesty. So you definitely taught me brutal honesty in a few different ways. And just in listening to you, and you were honest. What you shared very quickly, I realized was actually true. There was no ulterior motive. And that was really new for me. I think partly because of my religious background, where you always had to have the right answer, even though that isn't what you actually personally felt. And so you got used to just saying the right thing, but wasn't actually what you personally felt. But also because of you wanted to portray a certain image or whatever.
Say what people want to hear.
Yes. Or you wanted to protect yourself and things like that. So, but what is honesty something that was instilled in you early on? Like naturally, you were just found yourself being really direct and honest. And why is it so important to be honest? Because for me, it's given me huge levels of freedom where I can I'm just myself more than I ever have been. And what you see is what you get, and it's the same everywhere, and it's awesome because I don't have to change myself to get someone's acceptance, and if they don't accept me where I am, then that's whatever. But what's your relationship with honesty? Is that something that you grew over time, or is that from the beginning? And why is it so important just to call a spade a spade?
I think that there's a distinction between being direct and being honest, if I'm going to be honest.
Yes, of course. You don't have to say you don't have to share everything that you feel.
Yeah, you don't.
No.
You don't. And I don't think it's always smart to share everything you think.
No.
And I think sometimes the things you think are also just thoughts that don't need a lot of attention. I recently read a book, and I actually just got it for you, called The Let Them Theory, written by Mel Robbins. And she wrote something in the book that actually struck me. And what she wrote was that sometimes we have negative thoughts about the people we love the most in the world, right? Because we always have all kinds of thoughts, positive, negative, fearful, all kinds of thoughts. And so we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Some of them aren't the greatest thoughts. And so do we need to give our thoughts voice all the time? The answer is no. However, I grew up with two very, very direct people. My parents were extremely direct. My parents were extremely natural humans. They were expressive. They were critical. They were warm. They were big personalities. They were just very much comfortable in their skin,
Hmm.
even though, they were both overweight and, they were just so comfortable in their skin. And I remember the conversation I had with my mother one day, and I said to her, I called her Ma, why did we have to be born so fat? And she said, you have to love yourself the way you are. I love myself the way I am, she said. And I was amazed, just completely shocked, because who actually loves themselves the way they are? But that had a profound impact on me because I grew up with people who were very much pleased with themselves, pleased with the way they lived their lives, pleased with the way they interacted with others, pleased with their warmth, their generosity, their values, their all of that. They didn't live with any level of self-recrimination.
Yeah.
And so that had a huge, huge impact on me and my level of directness because it was modeled for me.
Yeah. It's interesting because it reminds me of there's a verse in the Bible that says, love God above all else, but then it says, love your
Well, say it
neighbor.
again. What did the verse say?
Love God above all else, but then it says, love your neighbor as yourself. And often it's looked down on in society, or maybe this is just Christian circles, to love yourself. But it's directly in there. But also, it sounds like your parents very much modeled that. They had this love and respect for themselves, which I think allowed them to also love and respect others as they were in their position of wherever they were in their life.
Yes, they had a high degree of self-respect, 100%.
So what if you are doing an unhealthy behavior and you really love yourself and just accept it? What's the how do you love yourself, but also
You can love yourself and still want to improve, right? You can love yourself and say, yeah, but this is a place where I could be better. I could do better. I could, maybe make an improvement.
just like you can love your kids, even though there's different areas.
Of course, of course. And who doesn't want to keep growing and getting better?
Yeah.
Find me one person.
Yeah. What have you learned over the last 21 years of coaching executives and business owners? Like what's these highly driven people that you coach, what are some of the common themes that come up that you keep seeing over and over?
Yeah, I see that they typically struggle in 4 key areas, and it's repetitive and it's the same from client to client, from location to location, from, position to position, industry to industry. It's the same. The first thing is that typically they feel very isolated. And let's take you as an example. There were things you never told anybody. Why? You didn't trust them. You didn't feel safe with them. That's not unusual. So very often, these individuals that we coach have lots of people that they are surrounded by. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily feel totally comfortable being open, transparent, and vulnerable with them. So they feel a great sense of isolation, right? They're surrounded, they delegate, they talk a lot, they interact a lot, but that doesn't mean they feel comfortable with self-exposure. So there's a sense of isolation. The second thing we see is that these people tend to have friction with others. Could be personal friction, work-related friction, professional, etc. And we see 2 kinds of friction. One is what I call overt friction. So if I yell at you and I'm cross and I'm, raise my voice and all that, I'm mad. Okay, so we see that. People get mad at each other. They're impatient. They're frustrated. I told you to do this. Why didn't you do it, etc. We see overt friction. But more often than not, we see covert friction. What does that mean? We see leaders who have people around them who maybe aren't performing up to standard, who aren't getting it, who are falling short in their expectations, who are speaking out of turn. And they get frustrated with these people, but they never speak up. Why? They don't have time to deal with this right now. No, I don't have time for this. And what they do is they lift up the carpet, they sweep it under the rug. And at first it's okay because there's only a little mound. But eventually that mound grows and it becomes hard. They start tripping over the mound and it's something they must address. But there are so many pockets in their lives where people upset them, frustrate them.
So I would categorize that under being a people pleaser, and you want to be accepted, so you don't want to be critical.
No, not always. Sometimes it's like, I just have more important things to take care of,
Mm.
and this is not my priority, and they should know better, and I shouldn't have to address this. And so I need to go focus on the things that are much more important than this. And I just simply can't, this can't be my area of attention right now. So we see that, right? This friction with others. The third thing we see is what I call chronic dissatisfaction. So it's a person who achieves, but they're not where they want to be yet. They don't feel like they're maxing out on their potential. They don't understand why it's so hard. What's taking so long? What's getting in the way? Is it them? Is it their team? Have they made the right professional decision? Are they where they are supposed to be? Should they consider a shift or a switch? And then they have guilt. They have all the time guilt. And the guilt kind of looks like this. They're at work, they're working hard, but then they're like, oh, I should really be at home. Then they go home, but their mind is on work. And then they sit down and they watch Netflix and they're holding their phones. And they can't be present.
Mm.
They don't know how to be present. And they're always exhausted. Right? And so they're always feeling like they're not where they're supposed to be. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And whatever they're doing, they're falling short. And last but not least, I see them struggle in this area that I call slippage. I made it up. So what is slippage? It's when they let important things slip through the cracks. Things like their health, their nutrition, their sleep. They're not having much fun. And they're letting life slip by them. And they're chronically exhausted. Maybe they're drinking too much. Maybe they're taking drugs. They're not like comfortable, with the feelings they have. So they spend a lot of time trying to numb those feelings out. And at some point they say, is this what life is all about? I thought it would be more than this. Or when do I get a chance to rest? When do I get the opportunity to breathe? I just feel like there's never a moment to rest.
So those last two really stick out to me because I see it the most as well. And the chronic dissatisfaction, or this drive to not want to be present, or don't know how to be present, I find is often very much tied to childhood, where they were never loved or accepted or good enough. Very, very critical parents.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but do you think that do you see a lot of that it's tied to that, or do you see other ways?
I mean, I see people struggling with a lot of inputs. Social media, they're on their phone, they're texting, they're emailing, they're TikToking, they're LinkedIning, there's all this input coming at them. So many things they're dealing with, so many, it's like they're under fire with all the inputs and they don't know where to look next. Oh, I gotta take care of it. So they don't actually know anymore how to stop and be silent. Have you ever seen anybody just sitting? Have you ever been on a subway in Toronto? There's not one person who's not looking at their phones.
Sad.
Right? So people don't know how to just be anymore. We've been conditioned differently over time.
So you've been coaching for 21 years. Have you seen a big increase in this then? Because
oh, yes. It's wild, actually. I could be talking to someone live and their phone dings a little, but it's like Pavlov's dog, right? Like that ding, they instantly have to take a look.
Yeah.
Right? They can't stay present. And that applies to clients. It applies to teenagers, husbands, kids, all kinds of people.
So these are the problems that show up, and these are the problems that show up. How do you coach someone? These are the common things that you're seeing in these successful people you coach. How do you coach someone to be more present? Like, so I do practical things, like I have a lockbox, that I put my phone in so I can, not be addicted to this thing, or try to unplug and remove the amount of inputs I have. But that's just as a coach, you're not telling people what to do. How do you work through?
So for me, it's really about awareness. Like, how do you feel when you are in this situation? And is this how you want to be? Is this how you want to live your life? If not, like, these people are smart. You found your own lockbox, right? Like, I didn't help you go and do a Google search for lockboxes for phones. That was your solution for yourself. So my feeling is these people that we coach are super smart.
Yes.
They are solution focused. They know how to find an answer to their problems when they realize there is a problem that is costing them something. So when someone is driven to solve a problem, there are many, many solutions out there. And it's not about me helping them identify a solution, although I could easily say, hey, I know a guy who has these lock boxes that he uses, right? But that's not the intention. The intention is to say, hey, this is really costing you your life when you're doing this. Is that what you want? Is that consistent with the outcomes you're looking for in your life? So if you want to build great relationships with your family, let's say, if you want to be the greatest dad you can possibly be, and this is something that's interfering with your ability to be the greatest dad in your life, what do you want to do about that? Is that important enough for you to address?
Yeah.
If it is, great. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah.
I don't need to be attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, that what you just said there, I think that was the most powerful thing I received out of the coaching was you asked me what I wanted.
Over and over and over again.
Yes, still do.
Still do.
And then you asked, is what you're doing helping you get what you want? And then you would challenge the behaviors that I was doing and say that you want. And the more that became aware for me, it catapulted me forward because it was so, once I identify something, I'm on it. Like I will deal with it right away. But the awareness thing is just so powerful, and seeing that misalignment. And that's I think that's why you have, like, I just finished with a guy recently and he's like, you changed my life. And it's like, I didn't do anything but bring awareness. And,
Exactly.
And it's awesome. It's such a, I love it. It's one of the most thrilling things. What are some things that people assume about coaching that aren't true? Accountability is one that people assume is just accountability.
I think that people assume coaching is largely about behavior modification. And for me, that's not what coaching is about. Coaching is really about helping people see what they can't see on their own, and helping people understand how their thinking is impacting the outcomes they're getting in their lives. And so for me, I can look at behaviors, and that helps me understand how someone thinks, right? That gives me insight to their thinking.
Does your actions show what you believe?
Well, our actions give us insight.
Yeah.
They give us a peek in, right? So, but it's not for me about making you do different things, right? That's not what coaching is. It's about helping you see the relationship between your thoughts and the outcomes you want. And very often it's about helping you see that the way you think and the behaviors you are taking on don't match with your desired outcomes. So the big misconception that people have is, oh, I'm going to hire a coach and that coach is going to make me do all the things I need to do in order to achieve my goals. And so therefore, like, yeah, I'll answer to the coach and I'll stay on track because my coach is making me do all these things. And yeah, some coaches do that, but I don't think that's great coaching.
No. Because it only lasts for as long as the coach is around, and as soon as the coach is gone, they're done doing go back to their old
that
things.
doesn't create sustainable change.
Yeah. Okay, one more question, and then I want to switch to a different subject. But how did you engage with team members and colleagues, or anybody for that matter, who are not open or intentional about growth or continual improvement?
I always feel like as a coach, my job is to help people reach their goals, personally or professionally. But if I get on the side of my client, right, and they see that I am here to help them reach their goals, then they become much more open to my assistance. And that's it. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. Right? I am here.
Yeah. So another way to say that is people need to know that you care.
People need to know that I care, but also people need to know that I'm really interested in what they want, and that it's what they want that I'm here to help them get, not what I want.
Which I think as a business owner, when you have employees, that's really, really important. Like you think of like Chick-fil-A, for example, it was very well known for helping their employees get to their next career move or what they want to do. And it's one of the reasons they have such happy employees, because they're seeking the employees' best interest. And in that way, they're also getting very, engaged employees. I think a lot of times business owners are just seeing their employees as a tool and not someone they individually really care about. But when you're coaching someone that maybe is saying, hey, I want more engagement from my employees, like they don't think I actually care about them or things like that. Or what's your approach?
I don't know. I see it a bit differently. I see that many leaders do care about their employees, but they don't know what the line is between personal and professional. They don't know, like, yeah, I really do care about you, but I'm also paying you to do a job. Just do your job. Right? So it's confusing to be a leader. And so they don't know how personal to get. They don't know if it's appropriate. They don't know if they are qualified to go there. They don't know if they're equipped. They don't know if I go there, am I getting into deep waters that I can't get myself out of? Am I crossing a line? Will this make it harder for me to be a good leader? Will it get muddy and dirty there? So I think it's hard for leaders to know what their role is as a leader. It's not that they don't care. Most of them do care, but they don't know how to care.
I remember talking to one leader, and I said, like, what you should say, like, how are you doing more when you meet an employee in the lunchroom and ask about their weekend. And he's like, well, I don't really care about their weekend though. Like, I don't really, I'm just here to get my coffee. Like, how do you engage with someone like that?
Well, again, what we want to do is say, what are your goals? And does this approach help you reach your goals? Right? Like I'm coaching someone right now who is extremely, extremely bright, but he doesn't come off as very warm. And so what happens is he creates like a little bit of like tension, let's say, or he's not building the relationships that will help him achieve his goals. And so he realizes, hey, my approach can use a little help. Right? So if there's value in a different approach and they start to understand that value, or rather understand the cost of the strategy they're currently using, then they'll be open to that conversation. If they don't understand that there's value to this, then you let go of it.
What would you say to yourself, the Kim of today, if you go back to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Don't get married young. What would I tell myself? Honestly, I would tell myself to not rush, to take time to go live life a little bit before getting really serious about everything. Yeah, I'd say go travel, go explore the world, go live your life, just go
enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I often say to the people I work with is, as a little kid, it's way more enjoyable to build the tree fort than it is to play in it. And so often we're just rushing to build and find ourselves being done, and life has passed us by, or decades have passed us by, and we haven't actually enjoyed the moment of where we're in now. Okay, I want to switch subjects completely. I want to talk about anti-Semitism and what's going on in the world today. I think it's important to talk about. Recently, there's been the big attack last year in Israel by Hamas. There's just this weekend, there's the people that came back, the bodies that came back from Gaza, the mom and the two kids. There's lots of anti-Semitism happening in Toronto, and in Canada, as well as that at universities. How do you process all of this? I can cut certain parts out. Is there?
You want to join me?
Yeah. So Alan just jumped in as I asked him this question, sharing that of the bodies that came back this weekend, the mom of the two kids was not actually the mom. It was another body of somebody else. And by the time this gets published, I'm not sure what will have happened. But
Right. So how do I process this is your question.
yeah, I mean, you're just, for me, I don't see you as like, I don't identify you as Jewish. I see you as Kim, right? Like you're my friend Kim and stuff like that. And your beliefs or your background are not like, there's no differences. There's no, it's just a thing, I think. And so, but in the world we live in, that's not the case. People are anti-Semitic, and they put you in a certain group simply because of your race. Uh, um, I can't imagine being in that spot, and especially seeing it rise up, and even in Canada. Like, how do you talk to me about this?
So there's so many ways that I process this. One is that I don't process this. I can't process this. What is happening in the world right now with respect to the level of anti-Semitism we're seeing is unfathomable. It's shocking. Like it's just like I'm dumbfounded by the unfolding of events. So this terrible, horrible, awful thing happens in Israel. Literally, not even one day later, there are protests in the street that are against Israel. There's no mourning. There's no acknowledgement. There's no compassion. There's none of that. And so for me, that's shocking. And if we look at October 7th itself and see what exactly transpired, it's horrific.
Beyond words, like it's crazy.
Beyond horrific. Like people were brutalized, and I'm being kind when I say that, in ways that there are no words to put to this. And in Canada, there's celebration in the streets. So these two things don't add up. Like, this is not humanity. This is not a normal reaction. And what ends up happening is they blame the victims right now. So now all of Israel is horrible, terrible, and bad. And so there's a very big misunderstanding of history. There's a very big misunderstanding of facts. There's a very big, when we look at media, there's so much misinformation that is going on outside and that people are not understanding or comprehending. Now more and more truth is coming out, but still, there's a delay. And so there's already a lot of well-entrenched beliefs that exist out there about Jewish people, about what happened, about history, about the Holocaust, about October 7th, about genocide, about what's happening in Gaza, and who really are the perpetrators of evil, of terrorism. And for me, it's all so hard to understand. And what has happened for me on a personal level, I think, is super sad, which is I've always historically been a true believer in goodness of human beings.
Mm.
And this whole thing has caused me to question that on a very, very fundamental level, because what we see is pure, unadulterated evil. And I don't understand how that can coexist with my vision of goodness. They can't coexist. So for me, I'm in a war with myself to say, what is the nature of human beings? And that's not a good place to be.
Because
I want to think good of people. I want to think the best in people. I want to, see a person and see all of them in all their best, beautiful light.
Yeah.
But that's been stripped away from me.
it's interesting because I mean, I believe differently on that one, that I don't think humans are fundamentally good. And I think they're not. I think the world shows how much brokenness and hurt there is, but we'll leave that. How have you experienced this anti-Semitism yourself, like in Canada? Like, as they're,
You know what? Like every single Sunday, not too far from my home, uh, Jewish people gather, and you can call it a protest. It's a peaceful protest. And, they raise flags, and those flags basically say, bring them home, which is please let these hostages free. There's still a bunch of hostages in captivity. So bring them home.
yeah,
That's the request. Right across the street, Palestinians set up their protests, and they say, kill the Jews.
yeah,
That's very close to home for me. That's in my neighborhood. That's where I drive down the street many times a week.
yeah,
So that's very, very close to home. And what we see is, yes, I am biased. My perspective is there is one group of people who are looking to live in peace. And there's another group of people who want to demolish, destroy that other group. So how do you feel when you're walking down the street or driving down the street? There's a group of people who want to eliminate you. How would you feel?
I mean, I don't know how I would process that. It's part of the reason why I'm asking you. And I think I want to learn about the issue more and know how to approach it, because I want to love all people well. And I think it's awful of what's happening, even in our own country. And I don't really understand it. I don't understand anti-Semitism. When racism, to a certain degree, I think is more understandable because it's visual. Like, there's the skin color that people are able to separate each other, but that's not even there now. And so I don't have the answers, and I'm confused by it. And it's one of the reasons I want to talk about it with you and let all the listeners hear as well, because I want more light on this issue, to hopefully for change, for the better, for compassion and understanding of someone who is Jewish and is facing this literally in a Western country that's supposed to be safe, and you're, even I think your daughter said that in the university campuses she didn't feel safe walking around.
Not at all. There were encampments. There's a lot of hostility. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of threatening gestures and experiences. So she stopped going to campus for a while. That's not freedom in Canada. What is that? And what's really bad to me is that the people in charge, politicians, government, has permitted this in a Western society. How is that allowed? There have been shootings at synagogues, at children's day schools. Like, in Canada.
Yeah. And so do you have an answer yourself to why there is anti-Semitism? Like, where is this rooted? Like,
again, I'm not the expert on the subject, and I don't want to pretend to be, and I feel myself getting like a little agitated, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a great deal of, retelling of history. I think that people have great misunderstanding of what actually went down. And I also think that there have been stories that have been propelled in the world about Jewish people, really poor depictions of Jewish people. And I think these have been perpetuated over the years, and that's not good.
Mm.
Do you want to add anything? Do you want to come and use the mic?
Oh, yeah.
You wanna
Just
switch?
share, and yeah, Alan, you want to jump in for a
Yeah,
bit?
come on in.
So everyone,
Sure.
this is Alan, Kim's husband.
Hello. Unfortunately, I do like to stay out of the limelight, but sometimes you kind of have to jump in. I remember in the 80s going to York University, and there was in Central Square, in the main center of the main campus, once a year, there would be Israeli Apartheid Week, because there was this huge misconception that Israel was an apartheid state. And at the time, York University had a very large Jewish contingent. We were all walking, looking over our shoulders. There were fights. People would attack. If we went to talk to the people that is manning the booths at Israeli Apartheid Week and say, do you know the story? Do you know the reality? Because this is not reality. Here we can show you. We would get attacked. And we would have to kind of not hide, but we would have to keep a low profile. What I'm seeing now, so this has been going on for decades. What I'm seeing now is that over the last, call it 10 to 20 years, there's been a buildup of a campaign that was just waiting for the right opportunity to launch. And October 7th was that opportunity. There's a document that has been circulated recently, I forget by whom. Apparently a pro-Palestinian group petitioned or applied for a permit to hold a protest on October 14th against Israel. They applied for the permit at 2:00 in the afternoon on October 7th. While this massacre was happening at a music festival in Israel, there were people already asking for a permit to hold a protest
Here in Canada.
Against Israel. This was not an unplanned, disorganized event.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people who partook in this massacre were Palestinian civilians. It's not just Hamas, unfortunately. There are many people there who have been indoctrinated with hate, who have grown up with hate, who have been raised and bred to hate Jews. There's no apartheid. Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. They haven't been there for 20 years. They haven't set foot in there. They will conduct raids when there are reasons to, and Israel is not a perfect country. I'm not saying they are.
Yeah.
They're like any other country. They make mistakes. They do things poorly. They do bad things.
Yeah.
But not at this level.
Yeah.
Not to warrant the kind of hatred that exists. And then anti-Semitism, whoever's running the show, I mean, all the encampments, everybody had matching big tents on campus. Where does the money come from that? How do they buy all of the exact same tents for encampments across Canada all at the same time? There's clearly a coordination going on. How do they all have signs in the same lettering, in the same language, in the same everything, whether you're in Alberta or in Ontario or Quebec or wherever? It's a campaign because it detracts from the realities. Hamas, honestly, is ISIS. It's the same thing. And the other jihadists, these are fanaticals. And their sole purpose, according to their own charter, and if you read the charter, it states very clearly, the existence of a state of Israel is unacceptable to them.
Yeah.
It's not about a two-state solution or a one-state solution or whether they're on this land or not, from the river to the sea. We want that land. It doesn't belong to Jews. They have no right to be there. We want it back. And we will do whatever it takes to get it. The truth is, Judaism has existed on that piece of land under whatever name the country was at the time for centuries. Long before the Quran existed, the Bible was there, the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Right? The Quran is younger than the Old Testament. So the concept of Palestine, other than it being a name that the Romans gave to that area of land during the Roman times, the idea of a Palestinian homeland was created by Yasser Arafat in the 70s when he stood up in the UN and he said, the Palestinians deserve a homeland. The Palestinians were never Palestinians. They were Jordanians who were displaced during the, I'm open to being corrected here, it was either the 48 or the 63 war, where Israel was attacked, pushed back, captured land, and those people were displaced because of that. These people are Jordanian. And if you look at what happened when our neighbor our American neighbor there said, let's move them all back into Egypt and Jordan and Syria and all this for a while and rebuild and bring them back. Who said no? Egypt said not a chance. Saudi Arabia said not happening. They all said we're not going to do this because they know these people are simply looking to cause trouble.
Yeah.
Their own countries don't want them. Yeah. But somehow they became Israel's responsibility.
So what's it like now when...
Sorry, I diverged a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. It's getting more information.
It's a hot topic for me.
And rightfully so. I mean, this hits close to home.
My parents were both Holocaust survivors. They've been through.
Your mom has the tattoos even on her
My
arm.
mother doesn't.
Okay.
My father did. He passed away about 10 years ago. He survived 8 months in Auschwitz. He was orphaned. His entire family was wiped out. My mother is one of the few child survivors from the Lodz ghetto. She survived 3 different camps, and she survived the Allied bombings in Dresden, along with my grandparents. So yeah, it's a bit of a topic.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but traditionally, the Jews in the Western countries have been more Democrat or liberal, depending on what country you're in. And there's now you see someone like Trump, who is viewed by the liberals as very bad, but also being very pro-Israel and trying to respect those people. How do you, am I correct in my assertion here? And how do you think through that?
What you're saying is correct. Trump does seem to be favorable to Israel. He understands the situation. He's responding to the situation. I mean, there's a whole backstory with Obama and Biden and all this, but I'm not
expert in it.
I'm not an expert in politics. I try to stay out of politics as much as possible. What I have said is, if they could split the presidency into 2, for an international president and a domestic president, Trump would be a great international president. Why? Because he's very assertive.
Yeah.
I'm choosing my words here because I don't want to get into the politics.
Yeah.
But he's very aggressive and assertive, and he's very clear. That's good for an international leader who has to deal with the various leaders of the various countries around the world. Domestically, I'm not a fan of him as a person. So I don't know, and I don't know how he's going to do domestically. But if they could have like an international and domestic, he'd be a great international president.
Okay, so I'm here in Chilliwack, like just have my little bubble of a world that I come into. Like I'm only more aware of it knowing you guys and what's happening and the real effect it has on your lives and seeing this happen. How do people listening educate themselves? Like how do you help? Is it just calling your local MP? Is it reaching out to your Jewish friends and saying, hey, I'm feeling this pain with you? Like how do you respond? Because I also often feel stuck where we're just like, okay, I have my faith, I can pray, I can reach out, but beyond that, I'm just like I don't. There's so much misinformation out there. Like I have even people on my own social media that are very like anti-Jewish or at least what's happening right now and their response to it, and you have people that are very supportive and caring, and I often I'm like, okay, where's my place here? Like, how do I show up besides, I try to love my neighbor well, and
so that's a perfect actually lead in. Love your neighbor as you would yourself. Like you and Kim were talking before about humanity, about whether humans are inherently good or inherently evil. I don't think there is an inherently one way or the other. People are who people are. They've been conditioned. They have grown in environments that lead them to one side of that or the other, or a mix of both. You're saying you have friends on social media who are anti-Jewish. It's going to happen. I have Jewish friends who are anti-Jewish. They think that Israel is committing horrible genocidal actions. But then I look at the media and I look at even when they're releasing the hostages, they're well fed. They're wearing winter coats. They're cheering. They're excited. I'm about watching these coffins, like the Palestinians are cheering these coffins being paraded in front of them. Those are not people who are facing a genocide. So how do you find out the facts? It's so difficult in today's media and social media because there is no real truth out there. Everything is slanted to one side or the other. All you can do is look at both sides and form your own opinion based on what you see and what makes sense to you. Right? I have a great deal of compassion for the innocent Palestinians, not the ones who were part of the groups who on October 7th, not the civilians who cheer when Israelis were being raped and butchered and murdered, but for the actual innocent ones who are caught in the middle of this because of a terrorist organization like Hamas. They are the ones who have my compassion. And I hope that there is a a peaceful resolution to be found somewhere by somebody that makes sense, that will keep Israel safe, will keep the Palestinians, allow them to flourish and grow. How do we deal with it? Unfortunately, there's no right answer. Just look at the facts, look at what's out there. Be furiously curious. Exactly. If you watch BBC, they're going to slant towards
Hamas.
Hamas, towards Palestinian compassion. If you look at CBC, they're unbelievable in their bias. It's actually insane. They're a government-funded media. They're supposed to be neutral. They're anything but. But then you read the Times of Israel. You read what's the British one? The Telegraph. Are more leaning towards the Jewish side of things. So it's hard to get an actual story. And my advice has always been, look at both. Go watch the actual videos. They're not doctored. They're not
Of what happened on October 7th. Yeah.
Go watch October 7th. Don't look at what's happening to the young men and women and children who are being brutalized. Watch the expressions and the body language of the people doing the harm. And when you watch the hostages being returned in their coffins and Hamas parades them on a stage and and even the live hostages are made to like deliver speeches, right? Watch the body language of the people around them. Look at the joy that they take from the other people suffering. Look at the joy that they garner from the hatred. If you're okay with that, support it. I'm not judging you. I will never judge anybody for their beliefs. I have a friend of mine I grew up with. We were friends since grade 3. I'm 60 now, so that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
He, on Facebook, he came out and he was like, look, they're resisting. The Palestinians are resisting. They're fighting back. I'm like, I'm done with you. I've known you for 50 years. I can't.
Yeah.
But I will never judge him for his beliefs. He can believe whatever he wants. But get the truth.
Yeah.
That's the long and short of it. Look for the truth. Get both sides, because somewhere in the middle lies the truth.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you both coming on here and talking about this. And
Can I switch back with Kim now?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah. My heart goes out to you guys personally, knowing you, but also just in this situation as a whole. It's sad. It's awful. And it hurts. Like I just feel the weight of it, even just talking about it now. So, yeah. I care.
It's not an easy subject.
No, I care. But yeah, anybody listening, do your research and care. Love your neighbor well.
And be curious and ask questions and get to know us.
Say that again. Yeah. Okay. Wrapping up that subject, that was heavy, but I'm happy we talked about it, and I wanted to do what I could as well to bring light to this issue, which is really affecting even Jewish Canadians here today.
You know what? It takes courage just to ask the questions and
be furiously curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to end on a different note with some shorter questions back to coaching and your story. Wildest or funniest experience as a coach?
Wildest or funniest experience as a coach? Oh, one time I coached a woman who was the child of a father who had 6 wives. And she was child number 28.
Wow.
So that was super interesting to me. I really needed to coach that person because I was very curious about her life. And I wanted just to understand what it was like to grow up in that environment and to be one of so many children.
And
I also coached someone who was the daughter of a very prominent U.S. politician. That was interesting too.
Okay. I know you had to sign lots of NDAs for that one as well.
Lots of NDAs. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I think one thing you come across as a coach is that you come across people's beliefs and stories that are very drastically different than your own, as you experienced with me and our relationship. And withholding judgment and being curious is so key to that. Leaving your own, I think how you teach is leave your own beliefs at the door.
Check your story.
Check your story. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Your own story at the door, and just go in with it. Is that something that you needed to learn as well, or that you found yourself doing naturally, where you went into it and you didn't say, can't believe you believe that, rather than, which you would never do as a coach anyway, but
Yeah. Again, totally natural. And really, I was doing it and realizing that's what I was doing. Right? Because if you come with your preconceived notions about what's right and what's wrong, then you're not really hearing somebody else's experiences. It's already colored.
Yeah.
And so you really want to be in a situation where you're receiving openly, and you're imagining what that person's life is like, was like, and how they experience things, how they perceive things, the lens they use to experience everything, their relationships, their work, everything.
If you weren't a coach, what would you be doing?
Somebody asked me that once before, and I said I'd be a matchmaker. I'd love to do that.
Interesting.
We just don't have a big enough database of eligible men.
That would be interesting. What are some daily habits that separate successful people from not successful people?
You know what? It's an interesting question, but I think whatever the habit is, it's consistency. Consistency. So it could be waking up super early and using that hour in the morning in a very productive way. Could be exercising every single day. It could be taking time to journal every single day. It could be, you know what? I stop work at 6 o'clock and spend the evening with my family. Whatever it is, and success is an interesting question. So how do you measure success?
That was my next question. How do you define
Right?
success?
So
What is success?
So success depends on what the person values. So if the person values a very healthy, warm, connected family experience, then whatever their habit is to breed that will create success for them. So for me, the issue is consistency.
So success is also, I think, often defined by a lot of people on what they believe other people think success are. And
yes, but is that true?
No.
No.
But you run into that a lot where people are like chasing money. For example, money is very much pushed by culture as if you have money, you're successful, which is definitely not the case.
Many people are successful with money, but they're very unhappy.
Yes. And so how do you get to understanding what success is for yourself?
Yeah, success is different for most people, but for me, when I look at my business and the mission we have, our mission is to help people live with greater ease, peace, exhilaration, fulfillment, and joy. And for me, that's the definition of success. So when you're living in that state, to me, success is living in a specific emotional state most often. Not always, but most often. And that could be, well, I feel the greatest amount of ease, peace, exhilaration, and joy when I am, I don't know, a professional basketball player, or when I am making a lot of money, or when I am home with my kids, or when I am, whatever that is.
And what if they say, I feel the most peace, exhilaration, joy, whatever, when I'm doing something bad, something that's a negative behavior?
It's unusual.
You think naturally people don't feel that?
So people don't feel any level of peace when any part of them believes that what they're doing is bad or wrong or unhealthy. They feel a sense of cognitive dissonance. So that's not usually the case.
Interesting. I have very much enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for taking the time. Anything else you want to say or ask before we wrap it up?
What is your greatest piece of wisdom as a coach?
My greatest piece of wisdom as a coach, I think it's honesty, being true to yourself. I think a lot of people lie to themselves. And when you lie to yourself, you're betraying yourself. And you have to be honest about the facts of what has happened in the past and what's happening today to move forward. You need a baseline. One of the most powerful things I did in my marriage with me and Nicole was our counselor got me to do a polygraph. And the polygraph was needed, especially for Nicole, to have a foundation to start off of, to move forward, to build trust again. And I think that's necessary in just all aspects. It's like you need to know what's going on and be honest about what's going on to be able to change. Awareness is the first part to change. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. And so I think a lot of people are running away from themselves or the situations. But if they would just take the time to face the facts of what's happened, for example, trauma is your interpretation of what's happened. And so how do you reinterpret it? Well, you need to go back and talk about it. And that, I think really holds a lot of people back. And a lot of people don't have someone to talk to where they can do that and have that safe space. And so I think, my advice is just be real. I want to get church made that say, be real.
Be real.
No bullshit.
Thank you for having me on your show, on your podcast. And thank you for being furiously curious. I think it makes a huge difference in the world.
Welcome. Thank you guys for listening. If you like this episode, please comment, like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you want to know more about Kim and Frame of Mind Coaching, you can find her at frameofmindcoaching.com.
That's the place.
She is awesome. And so if you want to work with her, reach out to her. I'm also pretty awesome, I think.
Super awesome.
So if you want to work with me, furiouslycurious.co. Thanks. See you guys next time.